Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This morning we talked about this verse in which we learn the dependent constructs, right? How many kinds of dependent or conventional constructs can you remember? I think three, right? No idea. Okay. So we have a, a constructs of name, constructs of compound or by compound, or constructs um, by inherent nature. Okay. So these three kind of conventional constructs uh, fall into the category of conventional truths. Okay, so we can contemplate the conventional truths, um, investigate the three kinds or three levels of constructs, and we can realize the the ultimate truth. Okay, so this is approach from conventional truths to realize its faults or its errors or its uh, illusory nature. Okay. Um. So and uh, after these three conventional constructs, we have how can I say illusion? No, it's called fantasy, right? Fantasy situation. And what else? Reality. So the world of reality and the world of fantasy, right? So fantasy aspect, for example, our dreams, okay, and a lot of example we gave this morning. So this is obvious. We know it's fantasy. So what about the reality? It's still we call it like illusion. Okay. So we use the example or the simile of fantasy to teach, or the Buddha used the simile of fantasy to teach us when we contemplate the reality is still like fantasy or illusion. Okay, is that clear? So, what does this mean? Is although it's reality, everyone can verify, okay, but nothing real, nothing unchangeable, okay. So this is a teaching to help us to eliminate or break the attachment to this world or reality world, okay. And then we have this verse, half verse. So this half verse is to further to give us further information, further teaching, instruction, uh, how we contemplate this conventional world. Okay, so the way to contemplate this conventional world is to investigate whether intrinsic nature exists. So eventually we will realize no intrinsic nature. Okay, so we will discuss this in this class or maybe tomorrow. Okay, so the next verse we have is how can I is to summarize the process of cultivating inside wisdom, so one can move from worldly to the transcendental truths. So the verse says, suffering is caused by afflictions and karma. Karma and afflictions arise from discriminating thought. Discriminating thought arises from conceptual fabrication. Conceptual fabrication is extinguished through emptiness. So we have a difficult term of conceptual fabrication. Have you heard of this? I don't think so. It's rare. How can I say? It's not common appear in the Buddhist canon or texts. It's a specific technical term found in Madhyamaka practice. Okay, so I will explain this term later. So, insight meditation leading to transcendental realization fundamentally examines whether all phenomena possess inherent existence. And through this examination, one can awaken to transcendental truths. So we repeat quite a lot the process. This method of investigating the truth is the gateway to liberation from suffering. So what is suffering? The body and mind of sentient beings themselves are suffering, particularly when the body and mind makes contact with other dharmas. This gives rise to afflictions such as worry and vexation. So this is the reason why our body and mind are suffering. Okay. Why do sentient beings experience suffering and repeatedly cycle through births and deaths? As discussed previously, it is due to affliction and karma. So previously means a few years ago, I think. Okay. So it's not in this class. So, and karma arises due to afflictions. Afflictions here refer to ignorance, particularly the affliction of perceiving intrinsic nature, which leads to grasping at I and mine. According to the sutras, ignorance arises from incorrect contemplation, that is, from sentient beings' engagement in improper discriminating thoughts. Why is it that our consciousness engages in proper discriminations instead of knowing things as they really are? The answer is because of conceptual fabrication. Okay, conceptual fabrication. So, what is conceptual fabrication? When improper discrimination arises, they create the appearance of encountering real substantial objects. This means that when the mind engages in proper discrimination, it experiences objects as inherently real and self existent. Furthermore, this process creates the illusion that these perceived objects exist independently of the discriminating mind itself. In the minds of ordinary people, objects encountered are assumed to actually have the characteristics that are manifested. Conceptual fabrication is the origin of our mistakes and does not accord with fact. Why is this so? If what we are recognize really does exist and its intrinsic nature is real, then it would be in complete contrast with our experience of things in the world. This would also mean that worldly and transcendental truths would both be un- untangible. Okay, so uh, when we think uh, things really exist and with intrinsic nature, that means um, it, it is unchangeable. Okay. So we start to have attachment to such object. Although we know it can change, but deep in our mind, we have such a perception. Okay. So this is the point we need to how can I say sort out the the deepest problem we need to sort out. Okay. So here we have a term conceptual fabrication. This is something um, deep in our mind when we uh, have a contact with this environment. We how can I say without any contemplation or consideration, we have an intuition, something like intuition, the object is real. Is that, does that make sense? Yeah, in deep in our mind. Yeah. So we have attachment to such a real things. So if we really realize the object has no intrinsic nature, so the attachment become no object to attach to. Okay. Yeah. So that's the key point of Madhyamaka inside meditation. The discriminating mind is essentially conventional understanding that, aware of conceptual fabrications' deceptive nature, mistakenly takes perceived objects to be real. If one properly applies right view, that brings about transcendental realization. to investigate intrinsic nature. After carefully uh, analyze, how can, sorry, after carefully investigating each layer of to get to the final point of the ultimate truth, one will realize that there is no intrinsic nature. So the approach to attain transcendental realization is to realize no intrinsic nature. Once we realize this truth, we personally uh, experience the transcendental state. Okay, so in this conventional world, what we can investigate is no intrinsic nature. Once we realize this truth, we experience the transcendental state. Okay. All dharmas lack intrinsic nature. This is the fundamental truth of all phenomena. Investigation into emptiness seeks to realize this absence of intrinsic nature. Through sustained practice of this investigation, one can transcend conceptual fabrication. Once conceptual fabrication is eliminated, improper discrimination ceases to arise because it no longer has objects to grasp onto. When the discrimination might cease, prajna naturally emerges, and one no longer generates afflictions or creates unwholesome karma. This means one no longer continues with sufferings, and so liberation is attained. The liberation gained by sages is attained using the method of insight meditation that investigates emptiness. So, what is the meaning of emptiness? Can you remember? Do you remember? The synonym is no intrinsic nature. Okay, so emptiness is a term to describe the situation we can contemplate. That is no intrinsic nature. So how can we realize or verify uh, all phenomena have no intrinsic nature? We we contemplate or investigate the the facts that all phenomena arise through causes and conditions. So what we can contemplate is these parts. Okay. So we continue to look at this world. Everything arises through causes and condition. No exception, right? So everything can, that means everything can change. The best situation can improve, and the happiness or happy situation can change and become uh, not so happy, right? So what we can do is to to develop more wholesome deeds or wholesome practices. Yeah. So that everything that we want uh, is on the right track. Okay. So we want succeed in something, and we need to have a correct uh, effort, and so that we can achieve that task, something like that. Okay. The next verse shows the investigation into emptiness, which says, all dharmas arise from causes and conditions. Due to arising dependently, they are empty of intrinsic nature. Because they are empty, they neither truly arise nor cease, and ultimately abide in eternal in the characteristic of stillness. So this is another difficult verse we need to learn. So how do we know that objects perceived as real by the discriminating mind through conceptual fabrication do not correspond to ultimate truth? The answer is that if everything we perceive were truly real, this would completely contradict our actual experience. Furthermore, it is impossible to prove that all phenomena possess intrinsic nature. To address this question of intrinsic nature, the Buddha taught the principle of dependent co-arising or dependent origination. This principle explains that all dharmas arise through causes and conditions. From the external physical environment to the internal aspects of mind and body, from phenomena as vast as the universe to particles as small as atoms. In other words, no matter what Dharma it is, they do not exist intrinsically as they appear. Rather, how they manifest is determined by causes and conditions. And this is embodied in the teaching. When this exists, that exists. When this arises, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not exist. When this ceases, that ceases. So very familiar. When we apart from our actual life experiences and the law of cause and effect, then we have no foundation to investigate anything. Let alone discuss the realization of the true nature of all dharmas. All phenomena arise from causes and conditions, whether through sequential causation, where one condition leads to another, or through simultaneous interdependence, where multiple factors support each other. This fundamental principle reveals that all phenomena lack intrinsic nature. Intrinsic nature refers to independent, self-existing essence. The hypothetical quality of existing completely on one's own terms, free from any external influence or dependence. Something with true intrinsic nature would be absolutely autonomous, arising and persisting without relying on anything else whatsoever. However, if something depends on causes and conditions for its existence, it cannot possess this kind of independent nature. Its very being is shaped and sustained by external factors, making it fundamentally relational rather than autonomous. Moreover, anything truly independent and self-existing would necessarily be unchanging and permanent. Why? Because if we move the influence of causes and conditions, the very forces that drive change, then any transformation in that object would would have to come from its own intrinsic nature. But intrinsic nature, by definition, cannot change, since change would require external influence. This reveals the logical impossibility. Nothing can be both causally dependent and intrinsically independent. Okay? Now, some people may propose or argue that an object's intrinsic nature includes change, right? But this position will mean that intrinsic nature has contradictory characteristics. So the definition is unchangeable. But if someone argue it's changeable, so it has contradictory characteristics. More correctly, change in an object is due to causes and conditions, and not because intrinsic nature naturally includes change. When we can observe how all dharmas exists dependent on causes and conditions, we can understand that there cannot be an intrinsic existence that is completely independent and permanent. This means we can understand that dharmas do not have a real existence as per what our erroneous perceptions tell us. Ordinary people tend to perceive that things possess intrinsic existence. This erroneous perception is delusion that arises from conceptual fabrication, which makes phenomena lacking inherent in existence appear to have independent nature. So conceptual fabrication produces erroneous perceptions, which in turn create the misconception that things possess independent, intrinsic nature. The absence of intrinsic nature is what the Buddha refers to as emptiness. Emptiness does not negate the existence of everything. Rather, it points out that a self-nature cannot be found, and hence there is no intrinsic nature. All phenomena that lack intrinsic nature are simply conventional constructs. They exist as dependent designation. The emptiness the Buddha taught does not prevent the arising of dependent existence. Indeed, precisely because phenomena are empty, they can be dependently constructed and arise from causes and conditions. Because phenomena are conventional constructs arising from causation, we understand that they lack intrinsic nature. Insight meditation practices that investigate dependent co-arising, lack of intrinsic nature, emptiness, and conventional constructs are essentially the same method expressed through different contemplative approaches and terminologies. Therefore, Nagarjuna states that whatever arises from causes and conditions, we call that emptiness. It is also dependent designation, and this is the middle way teaching. I think some of you may have heard of this verse before. Through this method of insight investigation, one can observe how all worldly phenomena arise, cease, are born, and die. One can also see the continuous flow of these interdependent processes and observe how they interconnected to form what we experience as reality. When one applies the teaching of emptiness, the absence of intrinsic nature, to investigate the underlying truths of all phenomena, one discovers that worldly phenomena exist dependently, yet lack inherent selfhood. This means that concerning existence and cessation, birth and death, there is no real arising or passing away, no absolute birth or death. Once we realize the truth of emptiness, we experience a state beyond arising and cessation, a, recognition that all phenomena fundamentally abide in stillness. This is not about departing from worldly process of arising and cessation to discuss some other realm of non-arising and non-cessation. Rather, it directly reveals the essence of arising and cessation itself, that their underlying nature is actually no arising and no cessation. Okay. Accordingly, although worldly dharmas continuously arise and cease, and things are constantly in flux, the truth is that they are permanently in a state of stillness. That is, the underlying nature of this state of flux is stillness, and this is not referring to stillness as a separate thing distinct from the state of continuous flux. The analogy of ocean waves illuminates this relationship between arising and cessation and non-arising and non-cessation. So I hope this analogy can help you understand this. While we typically see waves constantly moving across the ocean's surface, these turbulent activities is not the ocean's fundamental nature. When the winds and conditions that create waves come down, the ocean reveals its ultimate nature, stillness. Yet it remains the same ocean, whether turbulent or calm. When one relies on the doctrine of dependent co-arising to undertake insight practice and seek out what is intrinsic nature, one will gradually understand the ultimate nature of all dharmas. This is just as the sutra say. All dharmas have no intrinsic nature. There is no arising and no cessation. They are ultimately still. Their ultimate nature is nirvana. It may be hard for you to understand the relation between the conventional world and the state where one realizes the truth. Just ponder on it, and with practice, you shall eventually understand. I think I should give you some time to think about or digest the information I just gave, and uh, and give some time for you to ask questions. So, all clear or still confusing? Yeah, 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 yeah.
So first about the term conceptual fabrications.
Yes.
Would that be the same thing as what I know as mental proliferation?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And so the mental proliferation, it just happens, right? We don't have control over our mind. Like thoughts are constantly bubbling up
Yeah.
and passing
Yeah.
away, but we still latch on to them anyways.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out how perceptions factor in, right? So with the mental proliferation, like I said, thoughts come and go. Perceptions to me seem like it involves more action on our part, maybe based on previous experiences, our environment, growing up, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what is the connection, please, of perception to conceptual fabrications?
Okay, this is a very good question. So, let me put this way. For example, um, when the earth is poisonous and then the plant grow up, possess the poison. Can you understand? So, so
Being in that plant grows from that contaminated earth also has that poison. I see.
So the conceptual fabrication is like the poison in the earth. So whatever grow, it possess poison, right? So all the perception has is erroneous perception because of the conceptual fabrication. So it's deep in our mind. So
That because of the environment, it poisons the rest of everything, the mind or whatever.
So I think in this case, the earth is like the mind. The poison is the conceptual fabrication that contaminates the mind, and that's so deeply inset that we may not even understand it. But you know, through these masters, they point out that this conceptual fabrication exists, and so all the thoughts and mental activities that arise from this contaminated earth, like the trees and plants that grow, are contaminated by these conceptual fabrication.
So it's not really the land's fault, it just sort of happens.
So yeah, so in the sense that the mind is like neutral, but because there is conceptual fabrication there, any activity that then rises is contaminated.
But that's partially a perceptual problem.
Well, that's why you need to get rid of the fabrication.
Yeah,
Is
yes.
this the same as projection? Like you see what you want to see, or you just what you desire is what you'll see?
Yeah, projection is the terminology of Yogacara school. Yeah, but I'm not so sure whether they are the same. I need to contemplate or think about this. Your question is quite philosophical and deep. Yeah.
It does seem this it is a fabrication.
Yeah.
So is that why you don't see things the way they are? That's always that one thing that when
Fabrication uh make our perception um perceive seeing as real. That's the function of
you see
conceptual. Well, whether you want or you don't want, you will see. You always think the object has real intrinsic nature deep in your mind, although you know it's uh it's it's not the true. Yeah, but deep in your mind, you think it has intrinsic nature. Yeah, that's why we have such a perception because we have conceptual fabrication. So the key is how to remove the conceptual fabrication. The way is to investigate the phenomena that all things arise from conditions and causes. So this is the contemplation of emptiness. Okay.
Happens. You're even aware of it, but you don't know what to do about it, and you're trying to get the picture right. Maybe you're not getting the right vibe or something.
Maybe. Well, it it seems like our perception can't be correct because of conceptual fabrication, right? But it's not it's how can I say, when we come across the Buddha's teaching, things change. Okay, so without come across Buddha's teaching or the practice of contemplation or emptiness, we always think or perceive objects as real existent. Okay, so once we learn or we know that all phenomena arise through causes and conditions, we without any any how can I say, uh, 例外 exception, yeah, without any exception. So so we will destroy the conceptual fabrication.
So it's like say a wave pushed you along, and then you're in a place where you felt like
that you're going to fall in a stream and not be able to get across the shore. So the only thing you can do is try to swim the right technique out of being pushed by the wave. You just go back where you were, and then you get to the shore. Maybe.
Yes, that the way is the practice, right? You are talking about, you are saying.
Yeah, I'm saying is because these influences are there that you don't have complete control of all of those influences, but you just manage it somehow.
Well, once we have the right view, we can manage.
Know what's happening at the time, and you might have to.
So we need to practice mindfulness. Yeah, once this erroneous perception occur, we aware and we start to practice the investigation into emptiness. Okay. Yes, please.
First class, we are talking about that the ultimate reality is there are no karma and there are no karma's result. So now we coming to the ultimate still.
Yes, in the same meaning. Yes, that's the
State.
yeah, and yeah, yes. Well, they are the same situation, different aspects to describe the same situation. Yeah, so no karma, karmic results means stillness. Yeah, different way to describe the state of realizing the truth. Okay.
It's like quiet.
Quiet. Yes. Or
Sort of looks kind of still sometimes. It's too far away. Maybe.
Yeah, but the water is just still sometimes. It's still still.
yeah.
Always.
All the turbulent cause and condition disappear or eliminated. So the sea become still all the time. Yeah. So this is the true nature of the ocean, the true nature of the phenomena. Can you understand? So what we know is based on our experience or perception, right? In the inside meditation, what we experience is stillness. So that's the true nature of all phenomena. So in Sanskrit, emptiness is sunyata. Okay, sunyata has two aspects. One aspect means no intrinsic nature. Okay, the other aspect is stillness. So no intrinsic nature, the characteristic of the definition of no intrinsic nature is for contemplation. Once we realize this this definition or this characteristic, we experience the stillness. So can you see the step and relationship? Yeah. So what we can practice is to investigate the meaning of no intrinsic nature. Once we realize the meaning of no intrinsic nature, we experienced directly stillness. Okay. So I think I try my best to convey the meaning clearly for you all. I hope but you need to practice something like when we achieve the meditative concentration, we suddenly the how can I say, the sign around us disappear, and what we have is happiness, stillness, something like that. But this just similar situation, okay? So this is derived from meditation, meditative concentration. Another source is insight meditation. So only insight meditation, the experience derived from insight meditation allow us to attain liberation. Otherwise, it's just temporarily cease or tame the defilement or afflictions. Okay. Okay, I think it's time to finish the class.